Hello, good evening, everybody. My name is Councillor Gurj Singh. Welcome to this evening's Maidenhead Town Forum. Today, the date is Tuesday, the 12th of September, and I'll be chairing the meeting this evening. This meeting is being held in person and via Zoom and streamed live to the public on YouTube. I remind all attendees that participation in this meeting indicates consent to the audio and video being streamed live and acknowledgement that after the meeting, it will continue to be available in the public domain. Firstly, it would be useful if all panel members and officers could introduce themselves so the public are aware who is in this meeting and the role they are undertaking. So I'll begin with myself, Councillor Gurj Singh, and I'll start with the Vice Chairman.
Councillor Helen Taylor, Vice Chair.
And if other panel members and guests can introduce themselves.
Sorry, can you tap the microphone, please? Yeah.
Hello, I'm Group Manager Martin O'Keefe from Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue Service.
Councillor George Shaw for Boyne Hill.
Councillor Sean Martin for Belmont.
Councillor Joshua Reynolds, Councillor in Furs Platt, and also Cabinet Member for Communities and Leisure.
Councillor Cry Baskerville, Penis Green, member of the panel.
I'm David Hill, resident of Crawford Rise, and here to talk about my play.
Thank you. And if any other members of the public or guests would like to speak who haven't introduced themselves, they can do so when they speak. Thank you. I request that meeting participants do not speak unless I specifically ask you to do so. Once I've invited you to speak, before you do so, please state your name and the capacity in which you are speaking, if appropriate. I will ask officers to speak at appropriate times. If any individual attempts to disrupt this meeting, I am able to use my powers in the Constitution to adjourn the meeting and also have the individual removed if needed. We will now start with the agenda items. First of all, do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair. Councillor Kashmir Singh is just giving his apologies. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So number 2 on the agenda, declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declarations? Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to declare for transparency that myself and Councillor Taylor are RBWM appointees of the Royal Berkshire Fire Authority, and obviously Fire and Rescue Service are speaking today.
Thank you. That's been noted. Okay. Thank you. And third item on the agenda is the minutes. And can we start with any action points on the minutes?
Sure thing, Chair. So on page 6, so action Ed Goose to report back on the Maidenhead station team's assessment. Obviously, we haven't invited him back here because obviously the station team needs time to make their assessment. He could invite the Maidenhead train station back at a future meeting, or Ed Goose can forward his assessment results to us as the forum, depending how he wants to handle it. On page 7, and a report to be sent to Cabinet to hand over the access to the forecourt scheme. Still dealing this with Cabinet, is that right, Chair?
Yes, yes.
Okay, sure.
We're dealing with that item.
Okay, sure thing. The next action is on page 10. I have to share the website link to the existing consultation on Building C. Unless someone has received the website link to the consultation, I've not received it yet. I've chased them up on it. Once they give it to me, I'll share it with this forum. Next action is on top of page 12. Simon Linter shares presentation slides on the A4 crossing with the town forum. I believe I shared his presentation with this forum a short while ago. Next, middle of page 12, Simon Linter to ask about the crossing light system and reasons for the crossing location near Holman Lees, and then forwarded a response to Councillor Reynolds. I believe, he gave a response, and I forwarded forward his response to Councillor Reynolds. So that's been done. At the bottom of page 12, Simon in to check whether the traffic flow modelling was done before or after the closure of the Broadway car park. Last time I heard from him, he's still getting a response from another officer regarding this question. I'll still chase him up on this, and once an answer is given, I will circulate the response to the forum.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, that's everything. Thank you very much. Cheers. Okay, so we'll keep an eye on those points. Is there everyone agreed with the rest of the minutes? Agreed. Thank you. Okay, so we can get them signed. Right, and now we're just going to do a little swap around. I should have said it first. We're just going to bring the fire service item to number 4 and the resident update to number 5, because Martin O'Keefe from the fire service is actually on call out this evening, so we can get that fire service update out of the way and then relieve Martin back to duties. So Martin, you have the floor. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Group Manager Martin O'Keefe from Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue Service. My role is the East Hub Response and Assurance Manager. So I take on the role of being responsible for everything to do with fire service response within this area of Berkshire, Windsor and Maidenhead, and Slough and Langley. So I'm here today to discuss some of the progress Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue Service has made over the previous period. What I'm unable to do is comment on any specific individual buildings. However, I can give you an overall flavour of where we're at as a service. So I'm currently awaiting the data responses, for instance, in August. However, I can say that Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue Service attended 1,736 incidents during July. Whilst I don't yet have the figures for August, I can safely say they are likely to be significantly down on the same period last year, largely due to the unseasonable weather that we're experiencing at the moment. Throughout the year last year, we attended 7,300 incidents. Of those, 814 were property fires. And as a service, Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue has prioritised prevention activity with a view to reduce our number of calls. So since 2017, when we began prioritising this, we've undertaken 37,000 safe and well visits, where we've gone into people's homes, given fire safety advice and well-being advice as well. So we're now able to not only give fire safety advice, but also general lifestyle and well-being advice, and we're able to signpost people to the relevant authorities and partner agencies where appropriate. We've also provided significant investment into the service so that we've been able to respond to the 46 recommendations made to fire and rescue services and local authorities following the Grenfell tragedy. So from the back of that, we've undertaken a built environment project. Phase 1 of that project concluded with Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue Service undertaking 187 inspections of high-rise buildings throughout the county and providing 4,700 residents with individually tailored fire safety advice. When we undertook that review, we identified 97 buildings that were placed into special management measures due to cladding issues or fire safety breaches that were identified. We've then further invested in equipment and training for our staff, which has included the purchase of a high reach aerial ladder platform, which is capable of reaching up to 45 metres or 15 floors to enable us to deal better with high-rise incidents. And we've recently focused our attentions on water rescue incidents, particularly within the east of Berkshire, following a number of incidents over the previous couple of years, some tragic incidents as well. We've now actioned and delivered an additional water rescue capability, which is covering the east of Berkshire and is now running out of Slough Fire Station. This has been a significant investment in both training and equipment for the staff so that we're able to respond and improve our response within that area. Our East Hub Protection Department of Fire Safety Inspectors have adapted to the changes in the Regulatory Fire Safety Reform Order of 2005 and are now undertaking auditing premises that are not classed as private dwellings. So, for example, high-risk, high-rise residential buildings where they're now inspecting communal areas and working closely with local authority housing so we can share legislation and allow a more holistic approach to reviewing the safety of these premises. So for example, where we don't currently have powers to inspect individual flats, they do fall under the Housing Act with communal areas which fall under the fire safety order. So we're able to work jointly with local authority housing. So premises that are selected for auditing are either through proactive or reactively led. So an example of reactive would be our risk-based inspection programme. So where we've prioritised by data of a variety of risk factors, which includes things like occupancy numbers and floors, and we are proactively going out and inspecting these properties and enforcing where necessary. We also undertake reactive inspections, which are based off of the back of complaints, post-fire inspections following incidents, or when concerns are raised by members of the public, and we will also go and inspect and enforce where necessary. Some additional changes to the fire safety regulations that were introduced in 2022 allow us to put more pressure on the responsible persons and make it a requirement in law for persons that are responsible for high-rise blocks of flats to provide information to fire services, which assist us in planning and, if needed, provide an operational response. The regulations require responsible persons in multi-occupied buildings, which are high-rise, as well as those above 11 metres in height, to provide additional safety measures, as well as updating fire and rescue services on external wall cladding systems that have to be compliant as well, so that we can try and ensure that we are prepared and responsible for dealing with these incidents. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you very much for that, Martin. I'm sure there's going to be a few questions coming off the back of that detailed report. Councillor Reynolds.
For that feedback and that update. You mentioned safe and well visits and how many safe and well visits the service has carried out. How can residents help signpost their neighbours or friends to safe and well visits if they think they're needed or be beneficial?
Site, which is www.rbfrs.co.uk. They'll be able to find links to safe and well visits and home fire safety checks, where they'll be able to pass on their details, and members of our teams will be in touch to arrange a visit.
Thank you. Councillor Baskerville.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you met, I think probably possibly already answered this, but in recent years, we've had quite a few heathland and woodland fires in the area. I suspect that probably didn't happen quite so much this year because of the damp conditions, possibly. Is that true?
Yes, I think that's absolutely correct. In this period last year, where we had that prolonged heat wave, our number of wildfires had vastly increased. Now, that has significantly dropped this year, largely because of the change in weather. However, as a service, we are continuing to develop and improve and prepare for these hotter, drier summers that we are likely to experience with regards to climate change and everything else that goes with that. So we are currently in the process of equipping our 4x4 fleet with operational pumps, so that we are able to get a pumping appliance to those hard to reach areas, such as heathland, moorland and wooded areas. But we have seen a significant decrease this year compared to last.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? I have a question myself, Martin. You said about the cladding issues. There was 97 buildings, was there, in total? How many are there in the borough, Windsor and Maidenhead? So I know, you know, in particular in St Mary's, we did have several buildings. There was the Providence Place building, where it sits above Sainsbury's. Myself and Councillor Douglas are working very, very hard to get that cladding stripped back and replaced, and that's actually in the process of being replaced at the moment. And we have a Waking Watch in Kidwell's close, and I know the Housing Association and the original contractors are in talks about getting that replaced. But we just want to know how many buildings are still remaining in the borough.
I believe currently there are 2 buildings special measures, and both of those buildings, as you've already mentioned, have Waking Watches, which are essentially private companies that offer an immediate response to an issue. There have been meetings that have occurred today regarding one of the properties that you've discussed there around returning it to normal business as usual, which, as I said, I'm not able to comment on specific buildings. I would have to confirm the numbers for you, but I believe currently there are 2 in special measures within this borough.
Excellent. And are you comfortable with the measures in place at the moment with regards to the wake-in watch and sort of fire safety?
Yes, absolutely. So our teams are working really closely with local authorities and with the wake-in watch providers so that our crews are aware of the buildings. We've increased our predetermined attendance response to these properties. So whereas previously in the event of an automatic actuation of a fire alarm, for example, we might send a single or 2 appliances, we're now sending a full predetermined attendance for a high-rise fire. So we are preempting the requirement for further resources to be able to evacuate these properties. Part of the special measures is a change in the evacuation strategy of these properties. So moving from a stay put policy to a simultaneous evacuation, which would mean that on fire alarm actuation, all members of the public would be expected to evacuate the property and they would be assisted by the wake-in watch and by crews as they arrive at scene.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Councillor Taylor's got a question.
Thank you, Chair. Just something that's popped into my head as we've been talking. When it comes to planning new buildings, obviously Maidenhead's got quite a lot of development going on. Whereabouts in the planning process did the fire service get consulted, and has that changed at all since the Grenfell tragedy? Do you have more input at an earlier stage, or is it still at a later stage in the process?
So fire service consulted on completion and approval of the plans. So that would then be shared with our fire safety inspection team, who then have, I believe, 28 days to consult on any fire service changes. We would then be consulted further as the building develops and the building is completed, where we then would inspect for compliance. But as far as consultation goes, that's in the planning stages. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Councillor Martin.
Yes, when there's been an established issue with the building, do they have a time frame, the building owner, in which to repair them or rectify?
So that varies from case to case, and it's done with regards to local authority as well, so that they work closely with the fire service and the building owners to try and rectify the issue as soon as possible. As we've seen with the cladding, because of the huge cost and timeframes involved in having this cladding removed, there hasn't been a specific kind of generic timeframe that's been given to that, and it's been established on a case-by-case basis. Thank you.
Excellent. I think that's all the questions. Thank you very much for that, Martin. Really pleased with that presentation and for your attendance. Thank you very much. You're free to go if you want, or stay around and listen to our resident update. No problem. No problem. Thank you. Cheers. Okay, so if we move on to the next agenda item, the resident update. Shall we start with, so we've got a guest here who I've invited under the chairman's privilege. It's David Hill. So David's a local resident who's written and undertaken a presentation and is also starring in the presentation himself. So I won't steal David's thunder and I'll give you the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to you and share what I'm up to. I've been a resident in Maidenhead since 1996 and moved here with my family in order to be the project director for the Northern Farm Centre for the Arts development, which I worked on all the way through the great challenges of seeking lottery funding and building the project and project managing the construction, because the architect went bust part of the way through it. So it was an extremely interesting learning process. And then successfully opening it and producing and directing the opening galas. And it was sad to see the passing of Michael Parkinson, because he compared the celebrity gala that I produced and I programmed it for the first year or so. So it's great to see that the Art Centre is still thriving, and I've stayed living in Maidenhead ever since. My sons both went to First Platt School, had a great education there. But I'm also a writer and actor. And in fact, I did publish a book about 18 months ago about some of the projects I've done, which includes a chapter on the development of Norton Farm. So give that one a plug as well while I'm here. But most recently, I've written and created a full production of a new political and biographical piece of theatre called Draining the Swamp, which I'm sure you recognize the title from some of President Trump's pronouncements when he was running. And the play has 5 actors and is being presented in conjunction with Norton Farm at the Arts Centre from the 28th to 30th of September. So there are 4 performances, and this is in the Studio Theatre, follows a successful run in Edinburgh at the Fringe Festival. We did 12 performances there. And it's great that it's coming to my hometown, to Maidenhead. It is going to be on a national tour early next year, but Norton Farm has been very supportive, and I need your help. And I'm hoping that I'm going to interest you in this piece and that some of you might come and see it or share it with colleagues and friends, because obviously it's a piece of political theatre. And it basically explores the life and activities of Oswald Mosley, the leader of the British Union of Fascists in the 1930s, a figure who's been demonized through the years. And if those of you who saw the Peaky Blinders series set in the 30s, when he appeared with his wife, Diana Mitford, and incidentally, they were both part of the Cliveden set, so they have a local connection with Cliveden in the 1930s. But in Peaky Blinders, he was, and Diana portrayed in a very two-dimensional way as purely sort of thuggish villains, which may be a perspective, but I think the problem with that is that it fails to recognize that somebody is a more rounded personality. It doesn't lessen the danger of some of their pronouncements and views and activities. And I got interested in Mosley about 4 or 5 years ago, and was interested in the fact that some of the populist movements that were developing in Europe and around the country seemed to me to be showing a rise in nationalism akin to fascism, which suggested that the lessons of the 1930s perhaps hadn't been learnt. And certainly with some of Trump's pronouncements and what happened with the storming of the Capitol, you know, you start to think there's some lessons here that maybe need to be explored further. And how do you deal with extremist politicians? I mean, the US is grappling clearly with that at the moment and indicting Trump and then finding that actually his popularity is rising because of it. You know, these are difficult issues. So, so I got intrigued with this, and I thought that it would be really interesting to write a piece exploring his life, Mosley's life, his activities, and linking it to the present day and to what's going on now. He was a complex character. You may all know this, but he was both a Tory MP and a Labour MP in his time. And he was considered to be the finest speaker in the House of Commons in the 1920s. Churchill said he'd never heard finer speeches. He was expected to be the first Labour Prime Minister. So how come somebody who was coming up with ideas to tackle the unemployment crisis and the depression in the late 20s, early 30s that were radical, and actually some of which were taken on by Roosevelt in America and the New Deal? How come that somebody like that ended up leading the fascist party and going down that route? So the play that I've written explores why that happened, what were the flaws in his character, not least his womanizing and, you know, his relationships with numerous women outside of his marriage to Simi Curzon and then subsequently to Diana. And also, what was his legacy? You know, is there anything that is still happening because of Mosley? So I wanted to explore all that. And that was about his work in the 60s, because he came back after the war and set up the union movement and was a strong advocate for European Union and pushing for Britain to join the EU way before other politicians were. So there was once again a radical stance that he was taking. The play is about his life and activities, but it has a contemporary ending. And I don't want to spoil the ending because I'm hoping that some of you might come and see it. But there is a very chilling contemporary twist set in 2019, which is about true events that relate to Mosley's legacy. So you have to come and see it if you want to find out what that is. I should say that I play, as well as writing it, I'm the devil for punishment. I play Sir Oswald Mosley myself, hence my moustache. The play sees him, but first of all in the 1960s, and then going back to the 30s. So it's like him looking back at his life in the 30s with Diana. And the Edinburgh experience was great. We had really good audiences. You may know the Edinburgh Fringe has so many shows that the average number who attend each play, each night or each event is 6. So we had nearly 40 for each performance. So I felt that was really positive. And it was really interesting to get the feedback and hear what audiences thought. People seemed to be very engaged. They said they found the play fascinating, indicated that they'd learned a lot about Mosley and found the piece thought-provoking, if not a little troubling, which I think is always positive if you're a playwright. You want people to be a bit disturbed, but also to be intrigued and entertained. I've got some, if Lawrence can bring them up, I've got some images to show you, if that's okay, of the play. And it starts in the 1960s with the Mosleys at their house in Orsay in France. They relocated to France and lived around the corner from the former Edward VIII and Wallace, who were great friends of theirs, which perhaps says something. So it starts off then with him launching the union movement. And then we go back to the 1930s, and if you want to carry on with the slides, and we see him with his wife, Simi Mosley, who sadly died of peritonitis in her 30s, having given birth to their child. And he then subsequently had an affair with her sister, Baba, as she was called, which continued even while he was also had Diana Mitford as his mistress. Please carry on. So there's some interesting confrontations between characters in the play. Drama is always about events and conflict, so that happens in plenty. And if you carry on, Lawrence. We also then see the development of the British Union of Fascists and what was going on there, and lots of questions raised about the anti-Semitism and how much of it was led by Mosley or how much of it was Mosley led by some of the members. And you may know that William Joyce was one of his senior management team, who later, of course, absconded to Berlin and became Lord Haw and was broadcasting on behalf of Hitler to try and persuade the British people that they should down tools and form an alliance with Germany. So Mosley had certainly some very difficult and interesting characters who were part of the British Union of Fascists. And then in 1936, the big event happened that is celebrated still in the East End, which was the Battle of Cable Street, as it's called, which is a scene in the play where Mosley's BUF were denied the opportunity to march through the East End. Local people came out and put up barricades, and it was really quite a key turning point. Only a few days after that, and this is this picture, he and Diana go off to Berlin and get married in Goebbels' house. And, you know, there were only 4 guests. The 2 witnesses were Goebbels and Hitler. So extraordinary moment that this happened in Berlin because Mosley thought that if their marriage became known, Diana would suffer a lot of abuse because of the press reaction to him and the BUM. So there we are in Goebbels' house. And then we return to the 60s and we see what happens at the end of Mosley's life. And I'm not going to show you the pictures of the 2019 bit because that would give too much away. And final image I want to show you. So I asked Lawrence to keep till last. Now, that's one I've just missed. Yeah, there was a really interesting TV piece in 1967, a live studio show, David Frost, interviewing Oswald Mosley, his first appearance on British television. Fascinating. It's still available on YouTube. And I did transcribe some of that and also put my own imagination into it as well to create this scene. So there's the actor playing Frost. And then finally, you carry on, let's keep going. Yeah, I kept that image till towards the end because, you know, clearly we have to show the BUF in its full presentation, and it's actually quite disturbing playing that scene, I have to say. We had a very mixed audience, very diverse audience coming to the play, and I found that on the way out, people from whatever ethnic background got the play, understood what we were trying to say, and understood the messages that were being presented. And go on. And there we are. It's a quite provocative poster and publicity image for this play. The title obviously resonates with people and says that it links to the present. In fact, you know, I feel that one needs to draw attention to one's theatre work and be provocative. So the image is, but hopefully people come and find out that it's got things to say that are of value and interest. Nice quotes. We had a 4-star review, and apparently my portrayal showed the oily charm and charisma of Mosley. So you'd have to come and see whether you'd agree with that. The play has been published, and it's there as that's the programme, is the script for the show. And I really would welcome any questions that you have, but also I've got leaflets here I can pass around, and if anybody is happy to share a poster, put up a poster anywhere, that'd be great. And if there's people who see this online and they wanted to email me at davidhillarts@gmail.com, if they wanted to posters or leaflets that they could share, I will happily get them to them. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So there we have it. David Hill, from Maidenhead to Edinburgh and then back to Maidenhead. Who's got any questions? Councillor Baskerville.
Yes, I think it's a very interesting subject because I think in recent years, I think we've sort of shied away from confronting this sort of subject. I mean, there have been 1 or 2 programmes which have touched on it, which were, looking back a bit, I think Foyle's War, I think there was a character who was very much in sync with Oswald Mosley, and I think there was a character also in Endeavour, which was in the 1960s, which was very similar as well. I mean, if we go back far enough, I suppose there are certain warnings of that era and subsequently, like in George Orwell's work in 1984 and Animal Farm, for instance, it wasn't just fascism, it was also communism as well. But I think looking at extremism in general, I think, and I think we possibly have, as I say, for whatever reason, shied away from talking about extremism in recent years. And perhaps this might relight the fire of that, because I think we've become a bit complacent myself, I think, in recent years about the possible threats there are, which this sort of movement can create to democracy in general, I think. And I mean, there's some 1 or 2 quotes that, you know, certainly history has a habit of repeating itself, and you know, it's there's nothing new except what's been forgotten, I suppose, is another quote. But I'm just wondering how much you've tapped into that sort of psyche, as it were, and how much this reflects in this play.
Yeah, well, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's important to keep reminding people of things that have happened that are relevant to the present and that might impact on it. And one of the things there's one line in my play where one character turns to Mosley and says, it's difficult, he's actually Churchill's private secretary, and he says, it's difficult to know what to do with people like you, Sir Oswald. And that seems to me to be really pertinent, because what happened was that Mosley and Diana were interned in Holloway Prison without trial and without charge. And there's a risk that you can take actions which actually make martyrs of people or don't manage to manage extremism. And I think there's a difficult questions, and we're seeing that with Trump at the moment. How do you deal with something like that when whatever comes out, his supporters are even more on his side and perceive that everybody else is making up all this stuff, you know? So yeah, I think the job of a playwright is not to give answers, but to raise questions, in my view. So that's what I try to do, is to present things in a way that hopefully makes people think and question.
Thank you. Any more questions? No, if not, then I think we'll conclude that item. Thank you very much for that, David. Really, really appreciate that. It's draining the swamp. Tickets are still available, are they?
Tickets are available via the Northern Farm website, www.northernfarm.org, or through the box office there. It's 4 performances: Thursday the 28th, 5:30 and 8 o'clock, Friday the 29th, 8 o'clock, and Saturday the 30th at 2 o'clock. So 4 performances, and we would love to fill them all.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm definitely considering myself there, but 15 quid a ticket, bargain. We'll put a link in the minutes for you as well. And if Lawrence can stick a link in the comment section online as well, that would be a good little plug as well. But I don't know if we're technologically advanced enough to do that, but we'll put it in the minutes for you. Thank you very much for that, David. Really appreciate that, and best of luck with the show. Okay. Any other items? I think Vice Chairman, Councillor Taylor's got a few other resident updates that she'd like to give. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So we're going to try something a little bit different, and we're going to have a small portion of the agenda where we're going to list upcoming events in Maidenhead. We're heading towards Christmas, obviously, so there's going to be school fetes, charity events, etc. So if anyone does have any events they would like me to mention, please email me on councillor.taylor@rbwm.gov.uk. And I'm just going to give you a few that are coming up before our next meeting. So we have the Laughing Chili Comedy Club at Smokies on Friday the 15th of September, 7 till 10:30. We have the Maidenhead Coffee Festival at Northern Farm on Saturday the 16th of September, 11 till 4. There is a Harvest Bazaar at St Mark's Crescent Methodist Church on Saturday the 16th of September, 10 till 2. We have a country car boot and local market at Stubbings Cafe on Sunday the 17th of September, 10 till 2:30. There's the Maidenhead Town Show, which is in the town centre on Saturday the 21st of October, 10 till 4. There is a Halloween music festival at Off the Tap, which is in Maidenhead on Sunday the 29th of October from 1 o'clock. And save the date, Maidenhead Christmas Light Switch On has been set for Saturday the 25th of November. I'm sure Robin will probably give us an update at our next meeting. So the next town forum is November the 13th. So any events that you'd like us to mention, please drop me an email. If you are on social media, go follow Make Maidenhead, which lists all the events in the area. And yeah, that's about it from me.
Thank you very much. I don't think we've got any other resident updates, have we? No, excellent. So then, in that case, we can move on to the next agenda item, number 6, EV charging points. So this is highway permit scheme and road closures. Tim Gwolickbeck, who's a service lead for transport and infrastructure, is going to take this one. Thank you. It's over to you, Tim.
Thank you. There's 3 separate topics, so with your permission, I'll pause in between each of the 3 so that there's an opportunity for questions about that particular topic. Starting with EV charging points, the question that was raised was, are more being planned to be installed? And the answer is yes. In February, Cabinet approved the adoption of the electric vehicle charge point implementation plan, which is accessible on the RBWM website. The plan calls out our approach over the next decade on how we feel that the council can help support the transition from fuel, so petrol and diesel cars and vehicles over to electric ones. It calls out that clearly we don't feel a role in every single type of charging. So ultra rapids will be done by the commercial sector, but there will be some areas where we as a council can and should play a role. I won't repeat the whole document, it's 30 pages. I will leave people to go and refer to it themselves, but some of the highlights include that we believe the appropriate pace of installing of devices are approximately 75 per year for the next decade. This will allow us to stay on par or slightly ahead of the forecast uptake of electric vehicles in the borough and nationally. These installs will be a combination of what we've nicknamed connected corners. So these are locations in residential areas where a number of bays can be co-located and people can access them and pay the relevant tariffs. The tariffs will always be set by the market price at that time. So this is not a council subsidised scheme. We will also be searching at ways of putting them into council controlled car parks. Again, there are already some in certain car parks. For example, Vickers Way has a significant number of charge points, but we will continue to explore rolling out across the borough. The way which we will do this is by partnering with a appropriate partner who has that technological ability to bring it forward. On the forward agenda for Cabinet in October, a paper will be brought for approval, which is to recommend joining another framework for the procurement of such a partnership. So I will leave Cabinet to make that decision and report back once Cabinet has made that call. What that will allow us to do is use that framework to then package up what we would like to see installed within the borough. We hope to find a partner that will allow both a commercially beneficial installation, but also where there is a social benefit that we can direct and not just solely based on where they can make a substantial commercial return. The current intelligence suggests that a commercial return could be 8, 9, 10 years, given it takes a while for the right number of vehicles to be on the road and requiring charges at those locations. So we will, the paper also, the original EVCIP, electric vehicle charge point implementation plan, called out a repeated investment by the council to be matched by a procurement partner, which is very much what other local authorities have done. And therefore we can have an influence without taking the whole responsibility of the maintenance and the installation of it, because that will be many millions of pounds of investment over that plan period. Clearly, it's a 10-year plan and things will and likely can and will change. And therefore, there'll be opportunities during that 10-year plan to review and make sure we continue to match the required pace. I can't tell you exactly which ones will be first. That will be part of the post-Cabinet meeting in October, decision to then start engaging with local ward councillors and identifying those areas that are of the highest benefit to residents and to the commerciality alike. And I will pause there, Chair, to see if there's any questions on this
Thank
topic.
you very much. Can you give us a heads up on the partner? Yeah, no?
The framework we are proposing will be the Oxford, the one that Oxford uses, that they set up, rather than us setting up ourselves. But that's not a partner. They're just a framework that will have a number of partners within that framework that we can then access based on whoever tenders in the most attractive terms to us. Okay. As I said, this is a recommendation at this stage, so please don't take this sharing as a given, because it all depends on approval by Cabinet at the appropriate time.
Okay, that's interesting. So we've got an idea, sort of, it's going to be batched. Okay, thank you. Do you have a question? Councillor Taylor's got a question. Thank you.
If that's okay. You mentioned about the connective corners in the residential areas, so communal EV bays, and did mention that you'd be obviously engaging with the ward councillors. As far as residents are concerned, is there a way for residents to engage and feed in where they think points should possibly be? Because obviously as ward councillors, we know our areas, but we're not necessarily going to know where all the electric cars are. So it would be useful if there was a way for residents to pinpoint as to where, the most users are.
Thank you, and has been for a number of years, a link on the RBWM website where residents can inform us of an interest in EV charging. So that is not a request for a charge point. It is a highlighting where demand may be, and that allows, we will use that data with the partner that ultimately gets selected to ensure that we get those where there is the greatest potential for demand tackled first.
Fabulous, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Councillor Reynolds.
Tim, I know that a number of local authorities are trialling, so Reading and West Berkshire at the moment are trialling solutions for people who have terraced houses to be able to access their home chargers to their vehicle without running cables across the streets, and where lots of people might park their car in front of their house, have an EV, but they don't want to trail that cable across the road because you've got health and safety issues that might occur. And quite a lot of local authorities are trying sort of trunking systems through the pavements where you can have your cable running through that trunking to the roadside. Is that something that we've looked at as a council, or have we spoken with West Berkshire and Reading about how they're doing it at the moment? Is it something we'd consider?
We have considered it and looked at it. We feel that even with those types of solutions, there are inherent risks. It becomes a question mark over the how solidly can they be installed. It weakens pavement because clearly you are creating a trunking system within it. And then there becomes a question mark of who's responsible for the maintenance of it. The EVCIP paper suggests that we do not approve that style of solution at this stage. Clearly, we will always keep track of what others are doing and what lessons they are learning. But in the same way as we would not approve of the trailing of cables because of the trip hazards and the potential for a legal implication as a result, we would also not recommend at this stage any kind of trunking. Should those trials that others are doing give a different outcome, then obviously we will continue to take that on board and perhaps, if appropriate, come up with an amendment to the paper that was adopted in February.
Excellent. Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Baskerville.
Well, like most people, I probably saw on the news, you mentioned Oxford earlier on, I think, and that's just signed, or Cowley have just going to be a centre for the electric car industry with minis are being produced there in the future. So it looks quite healthy in terms of this area, I suppose. It's called the Thames Valley area. We've already mentioned Reading and West Berkshire, and if you mention Oxford in that umbrella, I suppose you'd say, then this could be an area which could be at the forefront of possibly leading the way with electric cars. I mean, anything which can promote, I suppose, cleaner living or whatever phrase you want to use, it's got to be good for the environment. I mean, it's still in its early stages, obviously, electric cars. I mean, to me, the key thing would be if enough people or if enough cars are produced, then hopefully the price will come down, because it's out the range of a lot of people at the moment. And that, to me, is the challenge, I think, in the next decade or so, to get more people using them, but also to bring the price down, so to make it accessible for the average puncher, as it were.
Good point made. Councillor Martin.
Yeah, just a quick question. Were any of those rapid chargers that have been planned in the future? That was a resident who asked me that.
The terminology around charging is a little bit strange. That slow chargers are 3 to 7 kilowatts, fast chargers are 22 kilowatts, and rapids tend to be the 100, 150. We feel that those rapid ones, which require not only the installing of those chargers themselves, but often require even the building of additional substations, are of such a magnitude that we believe that that's for the commercial market to be determining where those right locations are. And if you look at other brands are available, but if you look at Tesla is one of the car manufacturers who are investing in that infrastructure to enable their users to get easy access. That doesn't mean we can't play a role. We can potentially identify locations, and is there locations within our estate that we can that can be utilised by those organisations. But I would, as the paper suggests, not recommend that we try and play an active investment role in that space.
Thank you, Tim. Any further questions for Tim on that section of his agenda? Shall I say no? Okay, let's move on to the next one, Tim. Thank you for that one.
The next two, and I'll take them one at a time, but the next two were questions addressed to the highways team. The officer responsible is not able to attend, and I've taken on the mantle of providing some information on his behalf.
Thank you very much.
The two questions relate to some information around how the highways permit scheme operates, and I'll start with that. And then the second question around road closures. In terms of highway permit scheme, there is some legislation that we have to abide by as a highways authority. So we have control of the local roads. So this does not include motorways because those are managed by national agencies. And we therefore have to follow a specific piece of legislation. I can quote it, but I think that's probably a level of detail that's maybe unnecessary in this forum. On the back of that legislation, we have created a permit scheme, and we have a team that looks after requests to that permit scheme. Now, the requests can be based on chosen work. So this can be work that perhaps even we do, developers do, but it's all about what access is required to the road space. And the permit team can then see what is being asked for, what is sensible in that situation, and therefore ensure that all users of that road space can continue to be utilised. There is also the requirement for utility providers to have access to the road space and their assets on it, either to introduce assets or to maintain said assets. And we can't restrict that access. So we have to allow them access to their assets or to so what we can do is work with them, and that's what the permit scheme allows, to identify ways in which we can do that in as efficient a manner as possible, to avoid a situation where multiple different utility providers are trying to access similar pieces of road space at the same time, and potentially resulting in a significant impact on the highway, on the local network. The permit scheme has a series of requirements in terms of how early they need to advise, depending on what it is that they're asking for, and it requires a response from us in particular timeframes, depending on the impact of the works. Utility providers are allowed to do emergency works, and this is particularly relevant to those utilities where there is a risk to the health of people. I'll give an example of, for example, the gas network. Clearly, if there's a potential gas leak, we can't be sitting there determining whether a permit should be issued. They should be, they need to go in straight away. They then do have certain rules to follow. So in such an example, they would have to apply retrospectively within 2 hours of being on site for a permit to work for up to a maximum of 5 days. If it can't be fixed within that period, they've got to apply for further extension up to a maximum of 21 days. And again, if it's beyond that, then further steps need to be taken to identify, but hopefully something doesn't exceed 21 days on any kind of frequency. The team does this all the time and manages that demand on the network as carefully as it can. Clearly, any demand on the network in terms of permits to work will result in inconvenience for which both utility providers and us as the highway authority can only apologise. It is impossible to create and allow for this maintenance or this installation without some inconvenience, but the team is very much working on the basis to minimise it wherever possible. I will pause there once again, Chair.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, Councillor Reynolds.
I think probably a number of councillors would agree with me when they say that we get several complaints about some of the utility networks that come and do work on the highways. And City Fibre is the complaint that I get on a frequent basis about the quality and the volume of communication that residents get from these providers before work takes place, and then the quality of the work that's left on the pavement afterwards. And quite often these really don't match up with what residents would expect. I think also we're looking at seeing that a number of roads that are dug up a number of times over a 12-month period. And I was talking to a resident in First Plat only today, whose road's been dug up 3 times in the past 12 months. Now, obviously, there are some of these situations which aren't preventable because there are emergency situations, like you said. But I suppose the question is, what more can we do as a local authority, both in terms of the communication with residents about works that are ongoing, but also in terms of that coordination piece to try and prevent unnecessary disruption over prolonged periods?
Thank you, Councillor. In terms of disruption, the consistent that's what the team will be always trying to minimize. But as you say, you can't always predict what may come up, and unfortunately, the utility companies may not be very good at talking to one another about works and when they take place. So, as much as we try within the best knowledge of our knowledge, if we give permission for utility organisation A in 1 month, we can't predict whether 6 months later somebody else will come and ask to dig up the same piece of road, because that may not have been on the agenda 6 months earlier. Where we are aware of that, we will always try and find ways in which we can get them to work together. But it's sometimes out of our control. In terms of communications, we do our best to communicate, and we use a system called One.Network. There is a link on the RBWM transport page. It's the first thing you see on the transport page. And that is actually a national site, so you can see all current and planned closures, and also some details and contacts about that. I appreciate that's a bit of a go and check, but I would recommend that as the single version of the truth. We do constantly try and engage with utility providers to provide more information and to better. There's an ask and there is a how much can you expect to get back, and that doesn't always marry up in the way we would like, but we'll continue to do best efforts. We do have the ability to review the work, so we do go and have inspectors to go and determine whether or not the permits, what we've shared and what we've asked, what we've allowed is being adhered to. If it isn't being adhered to, we have the ability to stop them work on in that moment and insist that they go off site and apply for a new permit to cover the works that they want to do. And in that situation, we can even go as far as charging a fixed penalty notice for failure to observe the permit. The permit application in itself also is a chargeable endeavour. So we will always try our best to give as much information as we can. And where it's our own things, we have more control because we're doing it ourselves. Whereas utilities, we are dependent on those third parties from hearing our message to say, please do communicate with members of the public and advise them what you're doing, why, and for what period of time.
Thank you. Yeah, one more question.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose then, if a resident sees that maybe overnight whilst the work is paused for an evening or after the work's done, that the way it's been left isn't how they would expect or isn't properly done right, who should residents contact within the council as the best source of information to go to directly?
Works, and hopefully, there's often signage on the works as to who's doing that work. And I would suggest that that would be the first point. I think if there is a concern about the quality of work thereafter, then it's a question to our highways team who manages the inspectors to see whether or not that investigation can take place, whether their belief that it's substandard work is indeed the case, in which case that can be followed up. And again, there are reported links on the RBWM transport page where people can make those comments.
Thank you, Tim. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. My go-to is generally One Network to see what's the issue, what's going on, how long is it going to take. So apologies for this really might sound a daft question, but are details of permits and works publicly viewable on the RBWM website is my first question, or is it just solely on One Network?
Given that I'm covering, I'm going to be very careful how I answer this because I don't know. And my understanding is that the information is provided into One Network, and that is how it's shared, which is why it's the first link. I don't think we then replicate that on our own website as a separate page, unless it's a large piece of work. For example, the maintenance of a major asset within the borough, in which case we might put a separate page on. Because there are so many pieces of work, I think that would be an awful lot of pages to keep updated on the website. But if you don't mind, it's probably one that I should take away and ask the relevant officer for a fuller response.
The reason I was asking was I've never found yet a way on one network to set up an alert. Now I know on our planning portal you can sign up to get alerted to any planning application within a certain radius of your postcode. So the reason I was asking that was I thought, well, maybe that might be a good idea if we have a database of postcodes and where works are happening, residents can then sign up to get alerts that, you know, a permit's been applied for, there's going to be roadworks happening in your area. That was my train of thought.
I would have to say that's either one network has that ability to create such a response, or whether we do. I don't believe our network, our own website necessarily has that technological capability, but I can take it away and speak to the relevant officers. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim. Councillor Martin.
In a case where a road is totally closed, like a cul-de-sac, for example, and it's, you know, there's certain hours that the residents can access their road. I know they've got access to emergency vehicles, etc. But if they need to access their car, for example, at 11 o'clock, and that's when the closure is occurring, but the surrounding roads are all full of permits, like resident permits, what happens in that situation?
I'm updating on in terms of that thing. If there is a road closure and there is no alternative access to a location, for example, in the cul-de-sac situation that you described, we try and make sure that we do communicate as far as in advance as possible to advise people to move their car. In terms of whether the nearest possible roads are permit only, then I think it's a question from that resident to determine whether or not a temporary permit could be issued. I don't know the answer to that, or how far they would need to go in order to find an alternative location to park their vehicle. What we try and avoid is where their car is stranded during the closed thing and they can't get access to it. And we had some of that in certain instances in Windsor, for example, where we have temporary road closures. But again, I would have to take the permit question away.
Yeah, that'd be good. There is absolutely nowhere else nearby to park. Everything's permitted because of proximity to the town centre. So it'd be good to have an answer for that for future use for residents. Thank you.
Good point. Any further questions? Anyone? I've got one question, Tim. So, you know, like around Maidenhead, like town centre, we've got a lot of development that's going on at the moment. And I see these applications, great big applications, and they have like construction management plans and delivery plans, and it's all phased. But very often when I speak to developers and I see what they're doing, they apply for the permit and they're almost pressured, you know, to get the work done in the amount of days, you know, and they carve it up and they put electric lines in, and then they remove the traffic management, and then 3 weeks later they'll carve it up again and put the gas pipes in, and then, you know, and then they'll stop and remove it, and then they'll put the water supply in, and you almost get like multiple permits applied for over a period of the construction. And do we encourage, or sort of, you know, is there any like banner there to, you know, encourage developers to say, you know, to ask them, rather than applying permits separately, you know, put within their construction schedule to have it carved up once and put all the lines in to reduce the disruption, and obviously do the 278 pavement afterwards when it's finished.
We are aware of multiple needs for people to access the same piece of road space, then we will try and achieve that. That's part of the whole permit scheme that we've introduced to achieve that efficiency. Where we're not aware, that's when it becomes a challenge. As I said in the previous response, it's where we believe there's only one need of access, and then we get advised of a further need of access later down the line. Now, the team will always do its best to identify as much information as it can, but if the information is not forthcoming and utility providers can't have those conversations together to coordinate their things, then it becomes more difficult for us to build that efficiency into the system.
Okay, but what I was talking about is before the utility provider gets hold of the council and applies for the permit, before that stage. So particularly with new developments and redevelopments of site, you know, when a site's commenced, we should be notifying the, you know, the developer, say that about the permits.
The planning team about in terms of what information they provide on approval for development to commence, what information they provide at that stage in terms of the permit process, and whether because I don't have the answer to that.
Okay. Just an idea I had, because normally sort of, you know, they have a decision notice at planning stage, and then you know, developers are gone, and you don't know when they're what they're doing until they obviously commence work. But I haven't got any further questions on that anyway. So Councillor Reynolds, just put his hand up.
Just for Councillor Taylor, actually, you can do what you are asking on the one.network website. So I have an account on one.network, which any member of the public can sign up to, and you are able to set up email alerts for either the whole town or a prescribed drawn area on the map, for either only when the road's closed, if they're going to have traffic lights, or for any situation where any works or permits are approved. So you can get that set up to your email either daily, weekly or monthly.
Just sign up.
Sign up on, you can sign up on the one.network website, input that you are a member of the public if you want to, and that you can create email alerts from there.
Excellent, thank you. We'll add that link to the minutes as well. Thank you. Councillor Baskerville.
I think you've already alluded to, or other people have, one of the situations that occurs regularly is the fact that there have been so many roadworks in the area in recent times. I mean, obviously you have to expect, particularly when there's building work going on and emergencies and all the rest of it happening. But it's been almost, in the last year or two, almost an epidemic of roadworks everywhere. I mean, for instance, people, particularly in this area where there's not a local hospital, I mean, if you want to go to Wexham or Heatherwood, you have to go across country, for instance. And to actually plan a journey to somewhere like Wexham and Heatherwood to get to an appointment on time, you need to know certain information, particularly for elderly people who rely sometimes on this from other people. If you're having to set off, and I mean, I counted several times going to Wexham and to Heatherwood in recent years, not one, not two, not three, 4 or 5 roadworks on the journey. And how can you predict your ETA on a journey like that when there's so many holdups on the way? And this is just little cross-country roads. We're not talking about major routes here. And we're going back to the point of all these various utility companies liaising with each other to try and ameliorate these sort of situations, because it can't help. I mean, you know, hospitals are under pressure. If people are turning up late to appointments because they're being held up everywhere, I mean, it's just a knock-on effect on everybody.
Yeah.
And to me, I think possibly there should be a national initiative to get all these utility companies actually speaking to each other on a regular basis, have a method of communication so everybody knows what's going on, and to liaise with each other so they can have one lot of roadworks rather than 3 or 4 at different times, because it must affect everybody, and also affect business as well as appointments for hospitals. I mean, people going to business appointments, not getting there on time, and that have an effect on you know, profitability and everything. I mean, it seems strange to me that there hasn't been a bigger movement to try and sort this problem out, because it's not a problem that's going to go away, I don't think. It's only going to increase.
Yeah, definitely. Good point. Councillor Shaw.
Yeah, on a kind of a small point. In the event of planned works failing and roadworks being unable to be completed, there has been cases in the borough where it's been left for months, even 6 months at a time, without being covered and without any estimated times of fixing. Is there any obligations or system in place to at least get the road up and running, even if it's not a problem with the road, it's the problem with the services underneath?
Can't talk specific situations, but I think my understanding of the way the scheme works is the application for a permit is both time restricted, so they need so much time to do it, to do the works, what the works that they're doing in that location are, and therefore they need to have vacated and completed the work in that in the period of which they have a permit to work. If they fail to achieve the objectives, they should then either apply for an extension to the permit, and it's subject to our team for granting that if it's feasible. If some other work needs to be done, then they have to make good and come back at the future time when a new permit is issued. So if there's a particular case that you're describing where something has been left unfixed, then that normally would be in contravention to their permits to work. So we'd have to then do an investigation as to why that might have been the case and what action we can take.
Thank you very much, Tim. And now the final question, road closures.
So this will be the quickest one, so hopefully. So there are, in terms of road closures, the kind of permits I've been talking about in the previous section often get dealt with on the traffic management. So traffic management is the introduction of narrow lanes or temporary traffic lights, but the roads, the majority of the road remains open, or a part of the road remains open to traffic, but appreciate with a potential for delays. There are types of work where a road closure is required, where simply the work cannot be done safely without stopping traffic altogether. An example could be as simple as a full resurfacing of a road. Clearly, you can't have cars driving over a freshly resurfaced piece of tarmac, and therefore, often these are as overnight closures. There are two different types. There are planned closures, where we have a minimum of 3 months advance notice required, so that we can identify, okay, well, what does that mean? What is a diversionary route? What other works are going on? And try and minimize, where possible, the impact on traffic for all, whether that's residents, businesses, and the like. The other type of road closures is about emergency work. And again, that's, as I referred to earlier, that yes, they can, my example of a gas company can go in, make the necessary repairs because it's in an emergency situation, but have to apply for permits for that closure retrospectively, so that we can make sure that one network is informed as quickly as it possibly can be, and make sure that they're doing the works within the rules of the permit scheme and the road closure. So road closures do have a much, especially planned ones, do have a much longer time frame, and that applies to all utility providers, developers, and even the council themselves. We also have to make sure that we advise the team of intention to close roads for the need for the implementation of new traffic schemes. Again, I will pause there. That's the end of my report. If you answer any more questions.
Thank you. First up, Councillor Shaw. Questions?
Yeah, the definition of emergency works, is that different or do service providers define emergency differently than the council? Because I'm getting some case, well, a case where I've received letters saying there's emergency works ongoing, but the council said a permit's been given 3 months in advance.
What I've been given as a briefing is that there was under the legislation, there was a clarity of what constitutes an emergency. So there is, so within that, and it's the New Roads and Streets Works Act, and it's Article 52, which is helpful by my team to provide me that level of detail. But it basically states that those utility providers do have a right to access the road, and we can't refuse them of it. Clearly, when it comes to communication, if what we believe is emergency work and what they claim is emergency work is actually permitted work, then that may be a use of language, which is probably where we need to make sure that we liaise as well as we possibly can with the utility provider to make sure that it's clear what is happening in that particular instance.
Great. So thank you for that. Any more questions in that area? Councillor Taylor, anyone? I've got one question. Road closures. Is there any big? Sorry. Was there a question, was it? Sorry, Councillor Shaw, sorry.
No, I just got a follow up with, it was suggested that there's a minimum time when, or a minimum amount of time that, work providers must give residents to inform them. Is that a legal requirement or is that a council imposed requirement? Could that be extended to give more time necessary?
So the act that we use for our, as basis of our legislation act that we use has that 3-month minimum. That 3-month minimum is for the application of a road closure. So within that 3-month period, they then have to make sure that whatever communication they want to do to residents is done. But if they don't provide us with at least 3 months to say, I would like to close road X, we would refuse it on principle. If they've done the 3 months, we would then do our due diligence, we do the assessment of what's required, and then give the permission to close the road at the time asked, requested. And during that 3 months, they would then have to provide the communication. Does that answer?
Is there an obligation when they must give that information to residents? Is it as early as possible, or is it whenever they want?
I don't have a detailed answer on that one, I'm afraid. I have to take that away.
Thank you. Any other further questions for Tim? My question was just, I was just going to ask you about I know the A4 crossing is underway now. What's the timescale on that, on completion? Because we've got the cycle lane being put in as well, haven't we? And also just wanted to find out about the A4 is not being closed off completely, is it, at any point? It's just going to be reduced down to 1 lane.
Otherwise, I would struggle to answer that question, Chair.
Oh, okay.
Because otherwise I wouldn't be able to talk about individuals, but that happens to be one of those projects that my team are bringing forward. The answer to your questions are, no, the A4 will not be closed in its entirety at any point during and the works will take place over the 6 weeks. So they start on the 30th of August and will be completed by the 15th of October. It's a very tight window of activity, and it's done to make sure that the A4 is reopened fully when it's the primary diversionary route for the works that are happening at Crookham Bridge, which is a maintenance requirement, which starts on the 15th of October.
Excellent. So you've coordinated. So there's no space for slippage or anything on that one?
No, we are very much on the case on a daily basis to do our utmost to make sure that gets delivered to plan. And that's the crossings piece. There will be further phases, which is into Holmanleys and on the southern side of the roadway, but those will be planned to avoid a situation where they're at conflict. Obviously, Holmanleys wouldn't be at conflict in terms of the diversionary route, but in terms of the southern part of St Cloud's Way, that could be, because that would require a lane narrowing or lane closure. Those will be planned outside of the window for the Crookham Bridge maintenance.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Residents will be very pleased to hear that. And I see Councillor Douglas is in the public gallery there, and he'll be holding us to account on that one. So thank you very much. Sian Martin, I think we've got one final question.
I don't know if George was before me, but I've literally had an email in just this second for a situation in Clydemont Road, where the road workers have put orange cones down and have just witnessed a fire engine not being able to pass. Luckily, there was a community warden around and he removed all the cones. So that, I mean, there's probably not parked cars there when they laid them out, but obviously since then, but it was, sirens were on, blue light, everything. So
I can't, it's very difficult to comment on individual things, but obviously
I'm happy to forward the email. Would that help?
The permits should be issued with a requirement for access for emergency vehicles to be maintained. Otherwise, if that can't be maintained, then there should be a question mark over whether a full road closure would be a more appropriate way of dealing with that particular incident.
Who should I forward that one to?
If you send it to Highways, and by all means copy me on it so I can see what's happening, but Highways will be your first point of contact.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Shaw.
Yeah, you've said that obviously there's ways for emergency services to access roads when they've been closed for these works. Is there any provision for businesses on said roads? So I'm aware of one with bringing a taxi service out of a road that is now blocked during the day. So will they have to run their taxis outside their business, or will they just have to close for a week? And has that been accounted for in the process?
I would have to ask my colleagues as to what the answer. Normally, in a situation where there's only one access to the cul-de-sac, for example, that we discussed before, in a situation like that, we would advise all users of all occupants of that cul-de-sac, regardless of what the purpose of that use is, to make sure they've got an alternative location. I would suggest that that's a very specific example, which I would have to take away to see what might be the answer.
Any further questions? No. Thank you very much for that, Tim, taking taking on the dual role this evening, and with all that. Thank you. Really appreciate it. So if we can, with officers online for the next item, this is regarding Maidenhead Library Services. And what we're going to do is we're going to receive an update and hear from Louise Freeth, who's the Assistant Director of Revenue Benefits, Library and Resident Services, and Angela Hoosman, who's Library and Resident Contact Lead. So it's over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you. Good evening, councillors. We're very, very proud of Maidenhead Library. This presentation will be focused on Maidenhead Library because this is the Maidenhead Town Forum. And I would just like to thank you for the opportunity to share with you what we're doing at Maidenhead Library now, and to take any questions that you might have. And Louise will also be available to take any questions. May I share the presentation, please?
Yep.
Lawrence, I just need the permission to share it, please.
Yeah, just going to do it right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're on.
Okay. Thank you. Just need to move myself out of the way. So RBWM Library Services. In 2021, we set out a library transformation strategy, and this was the vision. We will provide physical and virtual spaces that build connections and facilitate access to knowledge, resources, and support so that residents are equipped to aspire and thrive. And Maidenhead Library is our flagship library. We've recently celebrated 50 years of the current building. It's an iconic building. We had a week of 50th birthday celebrations, and well over 7,000 people visited the library for the celebrations and the events during that week. So it's a library that is used by a lot of people, about 1,000 visits a day, and that's for the physical space. But then, of course, we have on offer much more than the physical books and the physical space. So what do we have? Well, we have physical books, and we have ebooks, an enormous collection of ebooks as well. We have music. It's actually millions of songs. Music is available. Records are available that residents can listen to for free. We have audio ebooks, so you can listen on your phone or in the car or wherever you want to listen. You can download and listen to ebooks. We have newspapers and e-newspapers. We have e-magazines as well, a large collection. And just to mention that most newspapers are available through our online resource, which is Press Reader. So you can look at the advertiser without having to pay when it comes out every Friday. Or you can look at a newspaper from China if you prefer. That's also available. And of course, many newspapers from across Europe and America, as well as British newspapers. We have tablets for loan. These are aimed at people who do not have access to an internet connection and do not have access to their own device. And we have Canopy, which is thousands of films that you can watch as well. So that's our e-offer, our lending offer. And then we have an online reference offer as well. And we have about 30 online reference resources. And some examples are the Universal Credit How-To Guide, BFI Replay. That's 60 years of screen stories, digitized and preserved, thousands of films and TV programs from the National Archive. Access to research, absolutely brilliant. If you are, if you're studying or you're interested in information at an academic level, that's 30 million academic journals, research papers and articles from top universities across the country. Future Learn, these are short online courses from top universities and specialist organizations. And then training and tools from Google Digital Garage, basic digital skills. Learn My Way, absolutely brilliant for people who haven't used the internet before or want to set up their own email account for the first time. Learn about Word, Excel, basic office programs. It's got courses on how to manage and spend your money online and do that safely, managing your health online and understanding internet safety and security. It's an absolutely fantastic resource. And of course, staff in the libraries to assist people with these resources, which you can access that online via the library, best buys, don't buys, and so much more. Ancestry, probably our most popular online resource for family history. And RBWM Cobra. This is a brilliant resource. It's business support for startups and small businesses with templates, startup guides, sector guides and updates, business support, business rules and regulations, information fact sheets, local area profiles, and a business legal library. So that is our online reference offer. In terms of activities, if you do have a look at Maidenhead Library, we have activities on all the time. Class is adult learning. We have class support twice a week. We have Lego Create sessions, children's games clubs, Friends in Need book group, pop-up poetry, stories and rhyme times, Knit and Natter, IT help, weekly accessibility mornings, outreach events in the community, and a lot of CVS, voluntary and community sector support in the libraries. If you want to know what's going on in the libraries, just Google RBWM Libraries Events and the list will come up. And that's constantly changing because the events are generally tailored to the community and delivered by people from within the community. So different libraries will be holding different events at different times based on what the community wants. So all library staff are trained to provide effective signposting to support and to services, as well as to assist with the full range of council services. So if anyone has a question about anything, the library is the place to go. Our staff are very, very well trained in finding the information that people need. We have volunteering opportunities that are available for young people from age 14. This is very, very popular. And also weekend and holiday jobs that young people take on from the age of 16. Libraries are also designated safe spaces. The staff are trained in safeguarding domestic abuse and disabilities. So if someone is feeling anxious or concerned, you can ask for help and you will be signposted to the correct support. Children from the age of 8 can use libraries unaccompanied. Public PCs and free Wi-Fi, including digital support from staff and volunteers, is available on site. The Summer Reading Challenge was extremely popular this year, the most popular that it's been for some years, which is very heartening after the COVID pandemic and the impact that had on children's attainment. There's a lot of evidence, very, very strong evidence on the impact of the Summer Reading Challenge on literacy levels. We have study and homework support, of course. And then we do reading development and inclusions work, and this includes outreach to the most disadvantaged children, literacy days, author visits, character engagement stories, and reading development work with vulnerable groups, including young mums and the looked after children. We have army welfare mornings, Book Start, Book Ahead. Book Start is a pack of books that goes to every single baby in the borough. And then we have the school library service as well. An extensive accessibility offer is available via libraries, and I've added the link to the presentation there for people with disabilities. So what are our key priorities? Traditional library services, of course. This is lending, both digital and physical, reference, both digital and on-site reference, local studies, public PCs and Wi-Fi, digital support, events and activities, an inquiry and information service, and that includes face-to-face council customer services. Now, we would consider all those very traditional library services. And then what else do we offer? Well, economic recovery, business support, training and skills development, and DWP employment journey partnership. Then we work hard to develop library staff as community builders and connectors, working closely with the voluntary and community sector and statutory services. We have very strong partnerships with Achieving for Children, with Optilus, and with a range of voluntary and community sector organisations to promote health and well-being, to support aspiration and reduce dependency. We have an exceptionally efficient community library model that delivers library and support services within communities, and we have a home library service. So anyone who cannot get to a library, they can join up our home library service and they will receive books, or if they prefer, they could borrow a tablet and receive e-books and e-resources, and they will get the support alongside that in their home, never having to leave their home. So we're consolidating the work that we've done to date, and we're carrying on to review any new initiatives and best practice ideas which come to light. And I know this is a short presentation, but in the meantime, just to encourage people to come in and get a good book and have a chat. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Angela. Absolutely amazing range of services offered by the library services now. I mean, the skill set required to be a librarian these days must be sort of phenomenal. I mean, it's unbelievable. I'm always really, really impressed at the amount of stuff that you offer, and the majority of this is free of charge, isn't it? So
yes, absolutely, absolutely,
yeah, absolutely brilliant. Councillor Taylor is kicking off with the first question.
Thank you, Chair. I deliberately didn't mention the community celebration in my little events coming up because I didn't know whether you wanted to say anything about it.
Yes, so I can't remember the date now. I think it's the 29th of September, the Friday evening. We are going to have a big celebration at Maidenhead Library in partnership with the voluntary and community sector. And this is to celebrate the partnership and what the work that the council does with the sector. I'm very much looking forward to it. It sounds like it's going to be a party to match what we did during the 50th birthday celebrations, where we had a silent disco, we had a vinyl frontier evening, lots of music, lots of karaoke and so on and so forth. And we're looking to have something similar on the 29th, on the Friday evening. Everyone is welcome. Come and enjoy the library. The one thing I will say about the library space, it is the most exceptionally flexible space. We can do anything with this space, from opera to discos to silent study. There's no limit really to what we can do within that space.
Fantastic, thank you. What time is that on the 29th?
I can't remember. Louise, do you remember what the time is? I think it's 7:30.
I've just been told 6:30.
6:30.
6:30. But they could always arrive earlier, couldn't they, and read a book whilst they're waiting.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. People are very, very welcome to come.
That's it. Thank you. Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Chair. And obviously, as cabinet member with responsibilities for libraries, this is really close to my heart. And thank you to Andrew and Louise for being here today to be able to make the presentation to Maidenhead Town Forum. I think it's really important. And I think it's really important that we champion that fantastic services that libraries and the library team offer within Windsor and Maidenhead. Like you said, Andrew, libraries aren't just about the books themselves, although it's a really important offer that the libraries have. But it really is about that safe place to meet, feeling safe, feeling really comfortable. And I think it's really important that we shout about that comprehensive service of papers and magazines that we have. I'm sure if you ask lots of residents where they could get the Maidenhead Advertiser for free, the first thing they say probably wouldn't be Maidenhead Library. But again, it's something we need to shout about. Things like a Which subscription, which today with the cost of living crisis is something really important that lots of people want but might not be able to afford to have themselves. Knowing that the library service has these kind of subscriptions is really important. And not just that Maidenhead Library, but if you think of the unparished Maidenhead area, Boyne Grove Library as well. And if you think wider than Maidenhead, Cox Green and Cookham, just on this side of the borough. So it really is fantastic to have. So thank you both for coming today to present to Maidenhead Town Forum, and very much looking forward to the community celebration events that we're holding very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? No? Okay. I think you've covered everything. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you
for attending this evening. Really appreciate this, and hopefully this will encourage more residents to attend. I don't know how you're going to cram in more than 7,000 residents in there a month, but we'll have to probably extend the opening hours, but that'll be another conversation. But thank you very much, and hopefully I'll see you both on the 29th. I'll be there myself. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor.
Okay. That's the end of that agenda item. So now we're on agenda item number 8. This is a resident questions and item suggestions for future forum. Any questions? Yes, okay. Councillor Reynolds.
I know, I remember at the end of the last Maidenhead Town Forum that we had, I suggested about an item from the Maidenhead Town team on new retailers coming to Maidenhead over the next few months. I just wondered whether any progress has been made with that and whether we hopefully could expect them at the November meeting.
Yeah.
I think it's scheduled for November.
It was in our pre-briefing. Lawrence, do we know if it's scheduled in for November?
I can ask Robin if she can come to the next forum, and obviously, like, she can I'll note her to include what Councillor Reynolds said about new retailers. Although she did mention, I think she also mentioned a couple of meetings ago that she needs to be careful about how much information she can reveal. So I'll ask her and see if that can be arranged.
Yeah, we have got a few high-profile retailers coming in, haven't we now? Okay, so we'll have a look at getting that in. Any other? Okay, Councillor Taylor.
I have a suggestion. If the chair is willing, and if Councillor Douglas is willing, look how fast he looked up from his phone then. Being the RBWM champion for volunteering, I would be interested in asking him to do a piece on the work he does at the Maidenhead Community Centre and what facilities are available for residents at the Maidenhead Community Centre, and just a bit about what sort of volunteering you guys offer for residents, to give residents some ideas of what they can get involved in around Maidenhead, if that would be acceptable.
Yeah, I see Councillor Douglas nodding. Yeah, you up for that? Okay, so we can do that. Good suggestion. Any more? No? Okay. Right, what have we got here?
Just outside the meeting, a couple of suggestions you've suggested was inviting Hollyport FC. Is that something you still want?
Yeah, we could do that.
Yeah, that's obviously town management update as well. So
the town, what's that town management?
Town management update, what Robin does. So.
Oh right, okay. So Robin, we can get in on November,
Yeah.
And we could look at I mean I've met Hollyport FC with other councillors, and obviously football important part of the borough, and Hollyport FC, they've done a fantastic job up there. You know, they've got the floodlights and stands in, and it'd be good to invite them here and sort of hear what they've been doing.
Do we want to see what kind of members?
Yeah, go on. Yeah, it's a good idea.
Sorry about the little discussion going on here. We had a kind of briefing outside of what sort of things we'd like to bring to the panel. One of the suggestions I made, which is what I'd like to discuss with you guys now, is charities in Maidenhead. Now, there are obviously some very well-known charities in Maidenhead, and there are some lesser-known charities in Maidenhead. So we thought it might be an idea to every other meeting, or maybe every meeting, depending on how it goes, to suggest a charity that might want to come in and just give a brief outline of what work they do, how people can get involved, how people can donate. Because obviously I'm quite aware of some of the charities I support are lesser known and very local, and maybe residents aren't completely aware of all the charities that are around and available in Maidenhead. So I'd like to know what the panel's thoughts are on introducing that as an agenda item.
Yeah, Councillor Reynolds.
Councillor, I think that's a fantastic idea. I think it would be really helpful to be able to have and see how that works. And I know, obviously, given you mentioned earlier the work that Councillor Douglas does as the volunteering champion, also I think potentially looking at the work that Councillor Bryce is doing with corporate social responsibility and having these items together, that's a really good benefit, and it raising the profile of local charities and local people. So fantastic.
Brilliant, excellent. Okay, so we'll look at cramming all of that into the next meeting, and then we can take it from there. Okay. Date for future meetings. We've done it. Was it 12th of November? 13th of November. 13th. Yep, 13th of November. That's the next meeting, and the one after that is 15th of January. Okay, so we can put that in our diaries. 6:30 start. Yeah, thank you very much. No further questions. We can close the meeting. Thank you.